Okay, so let me introduce our wonderful facilitator today. Sweta Kansagra is a licensed clinical social worker with a master's in social work from New York University. After finishing her degree, she went on to complete her clinical training at the Metropolitan Institute of Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy, an intensive 3-year training during which she gained the expertise to work with patients in psychoanalysis, which of course allows us to understand the unconscious process. She has a practice in Bloomfield called Therapy Story, focused on perinatal mental health and couples work and women's health. And she should correct me if I've gotten that wrong. And she's a passionate champion for increasing access to mental health care for AAPI and other marginalized communities. And we've done many wonderful programs together. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Sweta.
Amber, thank you so much. Yes, it's so exciting to continue to do this. Amber and I got to meet a few years ago when we talked about how to bring mental health discussions to the community and really invite in, how to navigate the stressors that everyone is experiencing, but being able to have cultural competency in our community specifically is so important, and to speak a language that feels familiar to each one of us. And so that's where we were able to kind of partner up and navigate this conversation that we're hearing so much our community is asking for. So the power of pause today, and this is really an intention to have a conversation more than just throw information at each one of you today, is really thinking about in the stressors that each one of us are experiencing in life being what it is, which sometimes is busy and hard, and navigating both macro level stressors, which is, hey, what happened on the news today? What's going on, at large? And then the micro level, what did I come home from work with today? What stressor did my child present to me when they were trying to do their homework this evening? And when you put all those together, to continue to have capacity to do them also means continuing to pause to be able to show up in them. I remind a lot of people, you can look at your calendar and you can say, I have all of this time, but what are you doing to show up in that time? And so when I even showing up in today's workshop, I thought about my morning, I thought about all of the things I need to get done in my workday, and I thought, I'm going to do a lot of them after this workshop today, because I could absolutely check a ton of boxes by 12 o'clock. But doing that means that you're not going to get all of me in this workshop, and that wouldn't be fair to the intention that I had. So I'm really, really hoping when we're talking about pause that each one of you is really thinking, how did I show up in this? Do I have 9 to 10 tabs open on the top? Am I hoping to multitask while I'm talking about being here? And I really hope each one of you is, at the least, if you're here and you're saying I need to do something else while you're here, please eat, please get a cup of coffee, please get a cup of tea, put your feet up, but really try hard to allow yourself to see what it feels like to not have to be in multiple places at the same time while you're here for this hour. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that already, in terms of, yeah, it was really hard for me to show up. Pausing for an hour is hard for me to do, and this took work for me to be here. If you have thoughts about that, feel free to let Amber and I know. Stepping into slide 2, Amber. So Amber's helping me navigate this space. So just really getting back into, what is your purpose? What's your goal for being here? My hope is that you read the description and you saw this workshop as something that could really help support what you need at home and in your professional life. So when we talk about acknowledging the fast-paced, high-achieving culture many AAPI individuals navigate, we're not just talking about your here and now. We're talking about the household that you grew up in, the values that were really provided to you early on in life, and how it may have been shared with you that working hard, being able to provide for your family, being able to get things done, productivity, whatever productivity means to you, is really what it means to succeed. And a lot of times we are really discussing that together from a place. Sorry, I saw something pop up. We are discussing that together in a way of saying that we're moving out of just focusing on being successful and what success can look like in a professional manner. And we're trying to say, what does that look like in a personal manner? And I think the comment that I just saw pop up, which was really helpful, thank you, was I almost didn't join today because I feel very behind on work, but here I am. The reality, and thank you for saying that because it's really honest. The reality is taking an hour out of your day is going to feel like a lot. But I often refer to what we are able to pause and do as building more length on our runway. I talk about the runway a lot as a therapist. How much runway are you building for yourself to be able to have more to give later? And so when you do something like this, most likely, hopefully, if you gain something from it, what you're gaining is capacity to show up later for yourself and for those around you. Yourself is really the key point. The other piece that I really want to talk about is rest, mindfulness, and reclaiming balance. So they all sound really nice. We're talking about mindfulness so much in our community. Now, if you look at any social media space now, especially social media influencers, there's so much discussion about, are you being mindful? Are you journaling? Are you getting enough sleep? And we all kind of laugh at those things because most people have a lot of reasons they're not getting enough rest. They're not able to be as mindful as they want to. And balance is something that sounds like a really beautiful word, but if you don't actually know how to navigate balance in your life, because you may not even know what balance means to you yet. I say you can't work in the direction of something that you don't even know what the end goal at the post is yet. And so we have to navigate that conversation together. But as members of the AAPI community, oftentimes balance and rest were not prioritized, and they weren't something that was considered important to even talk about, and somewhat even mocked sometimes in the community that that's not really something our community would need to do. I'm going to start with the grounding exercise. If you haven't done it before, I'm going to just navigate what it looks like for you. It's called box breathing. You're going to hear about it again later. So it's really breathing in and out for 4 seconds, 4 times. So it's as simple as it sounds. So you breathe in for 4 seconds. That simple breathing that I just did can allow me to fully slow down and just stop to be here again. And so the hope is that when you can do something like that, and I will say to everybody here, breathing is not going to be enough, but it is a starting point to open a door, to open a window, to help you navigate the information that you're going to talk about here today with me. So that was just a way for you to come here and come into this space. Another really simple grounding tool I love, and I tell people to do it often when they're feeling overwhelmed, is just to ground in the space that you're in. So when your mind starts to go into like, what's that work email? Or did I send that item to my kid's classroom today? I can't remember. Bring yourself back. Look in the room that you're in. I often say, okay, I'm in my office. The walls are navy. I've got this artwork on the wall. I can see the door on the right of me. It's a way for me to truly just slow down and be here with everyone today. Does anyone here kind of have anything they do that they would call a grounding exercise for themselves or a way to pause that they're already doing that you're implementing? Or maybe that you even noticed yourself do as we named it a little bit more clearly today? And you can throw it in the chat box or you're more than welcome to unmute yourself. Take a walk to go get tea. That's great because you're talking about two aspects. You're bringing in just movement in your body, which is great, but you're also bringing in something really somatic, which is when you get that tea in your body, especially if it's not hot tea, you're feeling the sensation going down in your body. So you're doing multiple things to help your body come back to that moment, especially if it was getting dysregulated. Ah, pet my dogs. Yes, we know that they're therapeutic for a reason. And it's not just the way that they can show up in a really kind of endearing, loving manner, but there's also that really soothing piece that you get from petting their fur. We can think about stuffed animals for children, right? The soft nature of them and why often they utilize them to self-soothe. We as adults forget that we did a lot of these things as children and didn't even know you were doing it to soothe yourself. And as adults, you can carry a lot of those tools right back in with you if you really think about them and think about what am I using in this moment that's helping me. Amber, can we pop over to the next one? Thank you. So this is, a pretty packed slide here because it's talking about several different reasons and areas that we could focus on. So cultural values, a lot of times in our AAPI community, we are informed early on that hard work, sacrifice, if you think about the word sacrifice, it's probably one that was used in many homes. And I will say, working across a diverse span of cultures in my practice, sacrifice is not one that every culture uses. We all have different words for how we show up and we use them kind of interchangeably, but sacrifice is one that stands out a lot in the AAPI community. I see you nodding on screen. And so I don't know if you have any input on that, Megan, but I really would, I don't know if you want to come in there because I saw you nod right away when I said it.
I was just going to say I grew up in Iran, and I think it's a common thread in
Mhm.
Eastern culture. Your
It
parents
is,
feed it into you how much they have
absolutely.
sacrificed.
And what does the word sacrifice mean, right? This
Right.
idea that I am going to forego a part of myself to be able to provide for the collective. Because when we think about our cultures, Eastern culture, API cultures, we're talking about cultures that believe in the collective. And I really say there's something so beautiful that we do not want to lose along the way in our cultures. Because being able to show up for the collective is what allows something like AAPI New Jersey to show up. It's what allows me to come in and be invited in to have a conversation like this. We're talking about as a collective, how do we grow? How do we evolve? But when we talk about the word sacrifice, what we're saying is I have to forego something within myself, something that I need, something that I probably should be utilizing in my own survival, in my own living, in my own eventual thriving. But I'm giving it up for what I believe is the greater good. And in that, there's less and less of me available over time. And that idea of what resilience is, right? That we can praise resilience, that we can celebrate resilience, that the more that you have gone through, the more hardship that you have experienced, and the more that you have overcome it, we will be proud of you. And we will praise you for all of those things. But had it come with ease, it's not as important. It's not as valued because things that come easy are not things that we celebrate. And family expectation. What did your household say to you was most important? What did your household inform you, right? We talk about words like informed. Very early on, we pick up on what we're being informed and we use those as ways to live our lives. I'm informed that going to work is really important. I'm informed that a career that others respect and praise is going to be important, that good grades are going to be valued, that getting into a college that's prestigious is something that others are going to appreciate and my parents are going to praise me for. Therefore, it's something I should be doing. A career that maybe isn't a field that my family will be able to celebrate, and therefore I will choose it. Partnership or marriage or children that are because of my collective environment, not because of my own desires. All of those are things that come into our cultural values that we're talking about. And if anybody has any input, you want to throw it in the chat box on things that stand out to you and your cultural values in your home, please feel free to add to that. And that model minority myth that I'm going to pop into. What does it actually mean to be a model minority? We're talking about this idea that in the AAPI community, you are often praised and valued and assumed to be capable of showing up in the community as a model citizen. You're not going to get in the way. You're not going to speak out or speak up. You are going to be of service to, but you will not block others from being able to do what they need to. And you will not utilize your voice over time in the way that others are able to. Because there's an assumption that as the model minority, you were able to succeed in this community where you know, other folks who have been able to migrate to this country have not been able to. But as a result, you will only be celebrated for what we need you to be celebrated for, and you will stay within that box that we need you to stay. So we will praise you for being quiet. We will praise you for being agreeable. We will praise you for being so easy to work with that over time, you're not even able to use your voice to understand what it is that you need. You're only able to use it to understand what it is that I can serve. And you go back to that cultural value. Being of service to others is something that was prioritized. I'm going to pop into that chat box because I saw something pop up here. Rewarded typically by money. So sends the message that money is important. Absolutely. Right. So not only am I able to recognize you, but I'm recognizing you via money, which means that I'm not seeing you. I'm seeing you via this thing that I'm telling you is important to get. Realized that I was taught that having fun or relaxing was bad and wrong because it meant I wasn't working. Exactly, right? So we're talking about this idea, and what does it mean to be bad, right? I'm bad because I chose to not wake up as early and go to the gym this morning. I chose not to write an extra assignment for class to get extra credit because I decided an A was enough, maybe not an A plus today. And that became problematic. That became a sign of laziness or not doing enough. And that could be talked about early on and really ingrained and informed in you. So when you think about a model minority who's always looking to reach a higher bar and that's being praised, but nowhere in there are you being encouraged to have an identity. Nowhere in there are you being encouraged to have a sense of self, a sense of your own needs and wants. It's really about what can we be of service to and how can we be quiet while we're doing it along the way. That
Rita, can I?
generation. Yeah, come on in,
Sorry, sorry,
please.
I can't use the chat box because I'm
Oh,
sharing.
Amber, go for it, please.
Yeah, yeah. I This is all hitting me hard, and I realized that even
Yeah.
there are Asian Americans who didn't have the privilege or burden of being raised in within an Asian culture, right? Like I'm a
Hmm.
transracial adoptee,
Yeah.
so I wasn't raised in this way, and yet still somehow these things have become like really deeply inculcated in me, which I think
Hmm.
shows the power of these you know, notions and values in our culture.
Amber, I think that is such a good point because when you say that your household didn't actually place these values on you, you're really acknowledging how much happens outside of your door and how much the community, even if your household wasn't saying these things to you, can enforce and then reinforce this expectation of you. And how, if you were starting to spend time in the AAPI community at any point, and you did start spending time with those who were raised in AAPI homes, even that was coming to you, right? This sense of what you could need to expect of yourself. So I love that you can bring in your example of your upbringing and recognize you still have felt that way projected onto you and feel that way at times now as well. Generational trauma and guilt. So we often want to acknowledge that generational trauma means everything that has come before you, every family member. We are talking about your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents, the traumas that they have experienced, when they go unmet, unhealed, unseen, they are provided and given to you over time through the parenting you will receive and the caregiving that you will receive. Because when others do not heal, they will project their experiences onto you, not recognizing that they are, which means that you are living with layers and layers and layers of conversation and voices around you that have been placed upon you and informed you that the things that they have felt for themselves, you need to feel for yourself. And so it's where a cycle just continues to be perpetuated over and over again. Our hope, of course, I mean, we look at if you have children now, our hope is that we are able to do the healing in these generations, that we are here having conversations like this. So we can really slow down, if not stop, but stop is a big dream, right? Slow down the cycle of projecting on to others. I'm just going to see what we're seeing here. I'm getting the lateral. Yes, absolutely. So the pop in here was just saying, not sure what you call it, but getting the lateral generational trauma, watching my siblings raise my nieces and nephews and seeing the same thing my parents did. So what you're actually naming is that generational trauma continuing to go on, because what you're seeing with your siblings is that they are not using their voices. They are using the voices of your parents. I'll just throw in a quick therapy term for everybody here in case you're ever curious about doing this work for yourself. We talk about something called internal family systems work. What internal family systems does is it breaks us up into different parts and it tries to understand whose part are you carrying right now? Whose voice did you just bring into this room? Was that Sweta's voice, or are you speaking from your father's voice? Was that your mother's voice? Was that your aunt and uncle's voice? really noticing whose voice is navigating the space right now. Yes, absolutely. Right. When we joke about, and it's not so much of a joke when we're talking about it in the form of trauma, but I just saw someone write, recognizing my mother's voice and words come out of my mouth, even when I thought, I swore it would be different. Absolutely. Because when you have not been able to wholly and fully process these parts of yourself, they will find themselves through your own voice. And suddenly you say, is that an accurate experience that I'm having? Or did I just kind of adopt somebody else's experience and bring it with me because I never questioned why that was said to me. I never questioned if that actually resonated with me or not. A lot of times as a therapist in the room, when I hear my clients bring something in and sound a bit ambivalent on why they did, I ask them, whose voice was that? Was that something that you actually felt? Or did you bring in someone's voice in this experience right now and not have a moment to challenge it or get curious about it? And I want to acknowledge it's not easy to get to challenge or be curious because it also means that you're having to look at parts of your parents or part of your caregivers that you have not looked at before from a lens that you have not looked at them before. And it's also allowing their experiences to coexist with yours, right? It's one thing to say, oh, my mom is tough. I can't speak to her about this and talk about it in the form of a story. It's another thing to say, I understand my mom has experienced trauma and her traumas have impacted how she speaks to me, but I have to be able to separate those parts from her from who I am today and really navigate the both end of that. So the impact on our mental health, it just threw so much at everyone. Cultural values, model minority, generational trauma and guilt. Here we are sitting here with all of this, right? How does it impact you? Anxiety, anxiety is a lot of uncertainty and worry, right? It's tolerating that uncertainty. It's how much uncertainty am I living with? What will come next? I'm worried about it. I'm having anticipatory worry at times, and it's so high that it's starting to impair the way I feel every day. We all have a baseline level of anxiety. I really like to reinforce that. But when your anxiety starts to take up more space in your life and starts to impact your decision making, oh, thanks. It's a place where we really want to be able to recognize that we probably want to talk about it being an impact on our mental health, fatigue, burnout. I'm tired all the time, right? It's one thing to be tired here and there. It is another thing to recognize I'm so fatigued, I cannot function in the way that I know I'm typically capable of. What is your baseline level? Your baseline level is how do I feel when I feel good enough? And if you recognize I am tired all the time, the things that I'm doing, I'm having a hard time engaging in, I'm not enjoying them, you're probably moving into burnout. And burnout can also look like depression at times, right? Those symptoms of irritability, frustration, anger, and we're having a harder and harder time sorting through them. You'll notice on the bottom, we have some recommended resources. These are things that we'll be able to send to you, just ways to continue these thoughts and conversations for yourself outside of this space as well, in case it's something you're curious about. Amber, can we pop into the next slide? Thank you. So just looking at this, I'm just gonna, sorry, I'm gonna go down a little bit. So the cost of hustle culture, rest is not a luxury, but it's a necessity. I am sure in one of our households, if not many of our households, we have heard that rest is a luxury, that it is a privilege to be able to pause, that it's a privilege to be able to say, I'm tired. I want to sleep in today. I don't want to do all those projects today. I don't want to take on an extra class or an extracurricular or one more activity on behalf of someone because historically, most likely in your families, no one questioned doing those things. They just continue to do them. We are trying to really enforce now that we need to rest because rest is actually what allows us to function. It's what allows us to feel physically and mentally well. And we really are trying to encourage others to recognize that our mental health is going to impact our physical health as well. Low battery power, low power battery mood. So we know what our phones look like when they start to, say, hey, no more, and you've got to plug them in. This is the same thing with what it looks like for us. Chronic stress is stress that truly just stays with you and you don't have any room to come up for air. I joke in adulthood that sometimes we say, when X, Y, or Z is done, I'll have a moment to pause. It doesn't happen that way, right? Nothing really stops. It's just that something new comes in its place. And so we really encourage everyone to recognize if you showed up today or didn't or decided not to log on and catch this later, most likely something else was going to come up in this hour or was going to have to wait, and it was probably going to be okay. But when you don't stop and you continue to function in that way, it becomes an over functioning relationship with yourself. I often use infants to talk about over functioning, and because we think about overtired, right? You know what it looks like to be wired, you know what it looks like to be overtired, and you can't rest your body. When we over function, we actually can't rest. We don't have the ability to stop. When we actually do less, we end up functioning enough, if not more than enough, because we get a lot of the things done that we wanted to get done, but we tend to do them even better than we intended because we actually gave to our mind and body first. And the cycle of never feeling enough. What does enough actually mean? When we talk about it in the therapy space, we talk about good enough parenting, good enough mothering, good enough, showing up today, good enough facilitator. Amber and I talked about this before we started. Can we just allow ourselves to show up as we were navigating some tech curiosities? And I said, well, maybe it'll just be good enough. Maybe our slides will mostly line up. Maybe we'll be able to play off of each other. Maybe we'll talk over each other a little bit on accident. But the reality is we're going to do good enough today because we intend to show up and be here with you. The other option would have been to meet early, to talk a ton about how to make it perfect. But what would have happened? I wouldn't have paused before. She wouldn't have paused before. You may have had something that looked like an A plus paper, but you wouldn't have had two people who would have been able to actually practice the art of pausing to be here with you today. And that's something that I really want to remind everyone we're trying to teach is it's okay to be good enough. That's really most of where we're going to land. And when we intend for anything more than that, we are not able to continue functioning in it. Does that resonate for anyone here? What that idea of feeling enough or can be enough is, or do you mostly find that you're trying to function at more than good enough? And as you're kind of thinking, yeah, thank you. Do most find that there's a goal setting of moving way past enough? Yeah. I appreciate the yeses to that because this is something that we really find ourselves all trying to navigate and create some permission around slowing down on and moving. Yeah, it can be really hard, thank you, Ever, to take the B plus or the A minus, right? Because most of us have the potential to be an A plus, but in that A plus goal, we lose a lot of parts of ourselves, our own voice, our own intention, and we don't really get to stick with what we need for ourselves. We end up sticking with what we think the culture itself needs from us. And we stay in that model minority window, right? We do great, but we do great at the cost of not really having a sense of what we need for ourselves as individuals. We're going to move into the next slide. Thank you so much. So in moving into this, I'm going to look at this and I wanted to start with the quote. So we did a book club last year on the Jenny Wang book, Permission to Come Home, Reclaiming Mental Health as Asian Americans. And I was looking at this book when we were creating these slides for today. And I just want to read something before I look over at the power of pause. On her chapter 4, if you end up with this book, it says, permission to say no. And it starts with two quotes, and one of them really resonated for this moment. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Unknown. Just need to say that one more time. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. How many times have you in this room recognized that you have pushed yourself way further than capacity? Your bucket has been empty for quite some time, but the people around you, they're doing well, and they're doing well at the expense of how you're doing. that idea of being set on fire within yourself because you are keeping others warm. If that's something that resonates with you, if that's something that speaks to you, I really just want you to pause in that and think about that. So the power of pause. Pause is a choice, not a weakness. Small intentional moments can help reset your nervous system. When you think about your nervous system, we talk about it from the aspect of fight, flight, freeze. Your nervous system is trying to figure out what to do based on what you are offering it. Are you offering it the ability to actually pause and consider what it needs? Or are you functioning in a way where it's assumed to just have to pull and grab from different things and dysregulate over time and really just make some impulsive choices because it's really not getting any ability to recalibrate? When your nervous system is working in that way, it's really moving not only into overfunctioning, but it's getting dysregulated. That dysregulation probably is causing some choices over time that are creating breaks in your communication, conflict around you, maybe small mistakes in things that you're trying to get done, which is probably creating more work for you later to go back and repair. And so when you take small intentional moments to help reset your nervous system, most likely you're actually going to create less work for yourself later. And work can be on a professional level or on a personal level, because when you don't have to repair, you actually get to be. Your to-do list will actually go down when you're not going back to fix. Mindful moments, what do they include? Breathing, like we did earlier. Gratitude. I appreciate the sense of gratitude. To be able to be grateful means that you actually have to have space to think about what you're grateful for. And if you're working in a place where, to use her quote from earlier, you're pushing yourself and kind of setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, most likely you are not going to feel very grateful for very many things in that moment. You're going to feel frustrated. You might feel some resentment. You might feel anger. And a lot of that's going to come from the fact that you are constantly pushing yourself to do more than you're capable of. What's another thing that can allow for a mindful moment? Stillness. It's literally doing nothing, the thing we don't know often how to do in our cultures, right? What does stillness look like? It's sitting, it's walking, or it's not walking, but it's pausing in a walk, right? It's sitting in a park, it's closing your eyes. And it's not long. It could be a minute or two. It's not a big ask. It's really just, did I slow my nervous system down? Did I slow my heart down? I often know that I have to create some stillness when I can feel my heart wanting to reset. And I go, okay, you have two choices right now. You can either meet it where it's at and you can join in, which sometimes you have to do, right? Not everything has room to pause. Or you can choose to say, do I have a minute or two right now? Can I stop what I'm doing? Can I pivot for a moment? And can I allow myself to pause to do this differently? We see the outcomes say that when you can do it that way, things are often going to feel better, look better. You're relationally going to feel better. And most likely in your workplace, you're going to feel better as well. Reframing reset. So productivity equals your self-worth. We don't want it to equal that, right? We live in the East Coast. We're talking about AAPI culture. We live in a society, America itself, right, that says how much you do, how full your calendar is. I can talk about the Montclair, Bloomfield, Verona, Glenridge area, right, and say that most people around here will tell you their calendars are packed, that they don't have a free weekend for the next 2 to 3 months, that if you ask them to grab a cup of coffee or dinner, they, in theory, think it's a great idea. They're probably not going to be able to do it because they have no free time. I tell everyone, if you don't have any free time, that's something to look at right there. There's something going on in your life. If you don't have 15, 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour to get coffee with someone that you actually like, to go for a walk with someone that you enjoy, to go for a walk with yourself. If you don't have time to do that, most likely you've been utilizing your productivity as a way to define your successes and not how you feel within yourself. Does anyone here recognize what they are doing that's working for themselves, or maybe that idea of productivity or any of these spaces speak to you, knowing about your nervous system, I'm just curious if this is something that already was a thought within our participants' minds today, or if this is something that's kind of standing out to you right now. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, finally putting yourself first instead of my kids' needs. Yeah. And I'm going to ask you because I know you popped in the box for me. Do you know what that actually looks like in a tangible way to put yourself first? I know for me, I say to my children often, that I am just going to go upstairs. It's okay if I need to take a moment for myself. It's okay if I'm going to pause. If I close my door for a little bit, it's not at you, it's with you, right? It's really trying to model what it means to pause. So you wrote time away for 30 minutes from everyone, go somewhere that brings joy. Yes, joy is something that in a world where we're living in now, where we jump on the news, we go into our communities. We live in a climate that these days doesn't actually make much sense to any of us. Um, we need to really recognize that joy is so important, right? So we can find ways to bring joy. I encourage everyone to really do that. But I go back to my earlier comment. You have to know what joy is for you. You have to be able to hear your own voice to know what you're intending to do, or else others will tell you, right? It's like someone saying to you, I love going to this gym, or I do yoga here, it works for me. And then you go and you go, well, why didn't that work for me? Well, did it come from your voice or did it come from theirs? Because you really have to know what resonates for you to have a lot of these things, reap the benefits in your world. We're going to keep moving a little bit forward. Thank you. So we go back to those strategies that we talked about earlier, the micro breaks, the box breathing. We did the 444 earlier on, right? The 60-second mindful body scan. This is really just short, small ways to check in with your whole body. And this is probably, if you've ever done any yoga or meditation or anything that's really just a slower movement within yourself, it's how do I feel in all parts of me? Am I attuned to my toes, my fingers, my knees? Can I feel it all? And what are they saying in this moment? A lot of times, if you work with a somatic therapist, and somatic therapists are therapists who are really asking you not so much cognitively how you're doing, but tell me what your body's feeling in that moment. So you might share a story and they might say, well, what do you feel right now in your chest? What do you feel right now in your stomach? Because they don't want the story. They want the experience that you're feeling within you, and they want you to really be able to attune to it so they can speak to that experience in your body and help you navigate and regulate that space. To do that, we have to be able to do those body scans and sit with ourselves. Stretching, short walks, the setting boundaries, learning to say no without guilt. Sure, we've all seen this statement somewhere along the way that no can be a full sentence. It's a hard one, right? It's a hard place to say no to others, but saying no to others means saying yes to yourself. And I actually think someone in API said that to me early on, is that it is okay to be able to say no because you're saying no because you recognize you have a limitation within yourself. And you're not getting an award for being able to say yes to everything or for being able to do everything. There is no attendance award now, right? This idea of saying no is something that we're providing to ourselves, but we're also saying, I don't have to feel bad. That's what the guilt is, right? I don't have to feel bad that I couldn't give today. Communicating your needs with confidence. So I cannot be unsure if I need something right now. I have to, with clarity, say, no, I'm not going to be able to do that today because I recognize I have a lot going on and I'm going to need that 30, 45 minutes that I had set aside. And so I'm going to have to say no to that right now. If you want to check back in a few weeks, we can, or that's not going to be something I'm going to be able to do for you at all. Thank you for the ask, right? Really being able to just end it with the period. So there's not an opening to come back. The opening to come back often comes from guilt. We invite others back in when we feel bad that we had to say no. JOMO, right? We know FOMO, joy of missing out. When we think about the idea that everybody's at this gathering on a Friday or Saturday, or we saw this event going on in the community and we chose not to be there, we gave ourselves permission to unplug. Permission is so big. Can I allow myself to stop? Can I allow myself to say, it's okay to not go today? It's okay to get rest. It's okay to read a book. I was going to go for a run with others, but I really don't want others' voices today. I just want my own voice. I'm going to go for a run alone. It's knowing these things about yourself and then allowing yourself to unplug. So when we think about unplugging, it doesn't always mean doing nothing. Sometimes it just means hearing your own voice and no one else's. Prioritizing meaningful rest over obligations. The word obligation probably resonates with a lot of us, as did sacrifice earlier. That obligatory sense that I have to do these things for others and I cannot do this thing for myself. When I prioritize rest, I'm choosing what I want to be a part of, and I'm not choosing to allow obligations to dictate where I'm going to be. Does anyone want to jump in on what they might do to set boundaries for with others, or what it means to actually say no without guilt? And Amber, I think you brought something nice in earlier when we got to meet today, which is recognizing that you took this weekend to allow yourself to pause and to really be able to sit with your family rather than kind of get to that to-do list that might have been waiting for you, right? So being able to say, I'm not going to do this right now. Not seeing anyone pop in right now. So do we want to go to the next slide? Thank you. So rewriting the narrative. So my practice itself is called therapy story. And part of the reason is I recognized early on as a therapist that we all have this narrative about ourselves and we use it to guide our experiences. We use it to guide how we feel. We use it to guide relationally who we're going to be in the world. And when we use these narratives, because early on they were formed in our lives and don't question them so much, we really use them to actionably make decisions for us. So challenging limiting beliefs. If I rest, I am lazy. Here's a reframe. Rest makes me stronger. It is the same exact outcome you have laid down. But when you say it from a place that it's actually going to strengthen you versus it's making you lazy, you're actually empowering yourself to believe that you're giving yourself something rather than taking away from yourself by putting yourself down. And again, putting yourself down, if we think in the AAPI community, was a way to encourage sometimes, right? That I'm going to give you that tough love. Oh, you just got to be on this. You must not be smart. Okay, well, they're going to go back and get an A then. On the other hand, we can reframe a lot of this statement, right? And try to find ways to be much softer and more compassionate with ourselves to rewrite those narratives. Self-care as a form of resistance. It's thinking again about, what am I having a hard time? There was probably a lot of resistance coming in here today to say, okay, what am I really going to get out of this hour? Is there going to be anything beneficial? You took a risk showing up. You took a risk to log on, to dedicate an hour of your life to find out today if this is going to bring in something for you. And most likely you felt some resistance when you decided to do that. When you decided to sign up for the workshop, when you looked at your calendar and said it's on a Monday, Mondays are hard. I'm going to tell you though, every day is hard. I have yet to find anyone say to me, Swetha, these Wednesday sessions, they're the best day for me. Because the reality is, if you're out there and you're performing on any level, as a parent, as a professional, as a person, you're doing a lot. And there is not going to be a day of the week I can imagine you're going to say, today was the day that it was great for me to prioritize myself. So we really recognize that resistance comes in for all of us, and we try to push through that resistance to show up. Personalizing your pause practice. What actually works for you? And this is a big question for everyone here because I would love to know. What works for you if you're currently already practicing some pause? Please chime in, whether it means unmuting yourself or whether it means throwing it in the chat box. I would love to hear what everyone's doing to actually pause right now. Oh, journaling. Yes, that's a really great one, right? It's a nice way to find yourself with yourself. You get to see how you're feeling, you get to read how you're feeling, and you get to come back to it. So it's a really nice way to revisit parts of yourself and really hear your own voice. Getting back to yoga and cooking. Yes, both of those are wonderful. So we think about yoga from that place of really slowing down and allowing for movement to be able to have impact, but also not be able to be in that form that we all think of, right? Where I have to go running or go to a HIIT class. And cooking is wonderful too. All the smells, so you're hitting those senses. Walks in the park is great. And yes, the weather has been tough, but just the idea of getting fresh air, we know when that sun is out, we get that vitamin D. All of those things immediately impact our mental health. It's why we talk about seasonal affective disorder, right? And people joke so much about the second the sun starts to come out and it warms up just a little, suddenly everyone goes, I feel so good. We joke in therapy, a lot of our clients in the summer are like, I'm doing great. We get it, right? The weather is beautiful. You're probably getting into a pool more. Maybe you're going down to the beach. You got the sand under your feet. You're taking a little bit more time off. You feel good. And that's great because what you're saying is that the things that already exist in this world actually have the impact to make me feel a little bit better. But what we're trying to encourage you to do is to know you can do that all year round. You don't have to wait for the summer to do that. Getting more sleep. Getting more sleep is absolutely something that impacts our mental health. So, as a perinatal mental health therapist, one of the first focuses, and I work with the postpartum community, or did much earlier in my practice, that was my primary focus. And the first thing we ask about is sleep. And sleep is a funny thing to ask anyone who just had an infant, right? But we know how much it matters for our body to get rest. Sleep hygiene is something that is a funny thing to have to even name, but we really ask you right away, and this is not just for a new parent now, this is for any adult who walks into my room. I say, what does your sleep look like? When do you go to sleep? What do you do before you go to sleep? The answer is usually scroll, right? If most people are fairly honest, they'll say they're scrolling on their phone. So we're really asking, when do you allow yourself to start turning off? Not when do you go to sleep? When do you allow yourself to start shutting down and turning off and really slowing your nervous system down so that it can go into a peaceful rest, right? Not just an abrupt exhaustion and then fall asleep because you're going to collapse. I want you to allow yourself to put yourself to sleep. So that might mean, I like using this candle in my room. I like meditating a little bit. I've been doing yoga nidras, which anything that just tells me to close my eyes and rest and will talk me through it, I'm here for, because I love to not have to think about what I'm doing next and let yoga nidra kind of navigate me through it. Really finding ways to encourage your nervous system to know it's okay to pause and you don't have to do it because we've exhausted you to do it. Amber, will you go to the next slide? Thank you. So this is kind of, us coming close to our ending. This is just, and I know we only have a few minutes left, but really taking 2 to 3 minutes to write or think, and you can share if you want to. What stood out to you and what does rest mean? So what does it really mean for you to be able to rest yourself? And my hope, as a professional in this space is that we're not all waiting for the next vacation. We're not all waiting for the next mental health day off. We're really able to do it in the life that you're living right now. You showing up today on a Monday with whatever else you had going on and whatever else you will have going on is really allowing us to know that you're able to pause amidst everything else that you have to manage in your life. And these are small ways for you to continue to be able to encourage yourself to do this. Does anyone want to check in and say what works for you? Hmm. Thank you for acknowledging that. Someone just said, this is the first time I have been exposed to mental health as it applies to being Asian. Yeah. Oh, that's powerful. That's powerful to say because this is something Amber and I often are having conversations about when we do try to navigate what it means to offer something in our community is to recognize that there's mental health and then there's what does it mean to talk about mental health in our communities. Being able to talk about it from a voice that comes from our community, an understanding and an awareness and a cultural competency, and then being able to bring in the professional parts of it is such a gift that we get to give to our community now. And I'm glad you're acknowledging it's the first time. I hope it's not going to be the last time. And that this is something that we continue to be able to really bring in. And Amber and I have already said it's going to be those mental health Mondays coming each month. So we have workshops coming for the next few months out there. And really being able to talk about it from the AAPI perspective and how the impact is there and what voices are coming in for us. We have about 4 minutes left. Does anyone want to bring in anything? I really want to be respectful of your time and your ability to show up and pause with us today. And Amber, I don't know if there's anything you want to bring in. We do have some resources popping in at the end that we're going to be sharing with everyone. So you'll have access to those as well. And I know on the AAPI website, they have a really great link for their mental health resources. So you'll be able to access all of those and be able to share that information. And I know Amber is recording this so that it's available to everyone as well. Rest means being able to address one thing, a thought at a time and feeling okay with it. Yes. Oh, yes. I love that. I love that. That is so true. And that is so accurate. I'll share a quick little nugget that I mentioned to Amber this morning when we were starting. I mentioned to I have two children, almost 8 and 11, and I mentioned it to my younger one that I was doing this workshop today. And as a therapist, I'm a big fan of therapy, and my kids do go. And so I said to my youngest, I'm talking about tools today on ways to slow down. And I said, does your therapist use the word tools? He said, no. I said, what do they use? He said, maybe activities. So we talked about things, and I said, what do you think you do to slow down? And he said things like color or grabbing his stuffed animal, or sometimes he just goes and lays and reads a book on his own. And then we talked about some of those could be activities you do to feel engaged, and some of those could be ways that you slow down and how they can be both. And so I talk about the same thing with scrolling, or, what am I walking to connect? Am I walking to slow down? What am I really doing? Because that might mean I'm going to podcast, or that might mean I'm not going to do anything. Right. And it's really thinking about what do I need in this moment? And when I know what I need, I'm more likely to seek it out in that way. And then my needs are met. And so I hope that everyone's able to, at the least, understand in our community, it's not something that was encouraged. And we are really trying to encourage everyone to look at these resources out there, listen to these podcasts, check out these books at your capacity and space, to know that it's absolutely okay to start being curious about these things, and that there's places to go if you are in conversations that are going to continue on. Amber, do you want to pop in with anything? Thank you for sharing that slide.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I'm going to be thinking about changing that inner narrative, because I realized I did view going to sleep as a kind of defeat that we did at the end of
Oh,
each day. Like
yeah,
I was like, oh, there's still so much I haven't done, but I'm just too tired. So like I just have to go to, and it's sort of like it's kind of a downer way to end each day, I'm realizing. So I
yeah,
think thinking
yeah,
instead rest gives me strength, or rest makes me strong, is a much better way of thinking.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's such a great offering to ourselves when we choose to do it with intention rather than we just kind of choose to do it to survive. We're really trying to move our conversation out of survival, right? So that we're really here and able to engage and enjoy what we're doing amidst all the other stressors that we cannot always control or dictate along the way. I want to thank you for acknowledging in the chat box, but thank you so much for showing up. It's a big deal to take time to be out here today and to spend an hour here. And I'm very appreciative of this opportunity. And I'm just appreciative that everybody was able to chime in so much and share as much as you did. It was really nice to see everyone and show up. And Amber, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sweta. This was really great and definitely worth taking the hour.
All right. Well, I hope everybody's able to take a glass of water, tea, maybe even a little lunch, and pause, and then get back to the day that you have intended. All right. Thank
Uh,
you.
Did you mention that at the beginning of each month, a Monday, there would be a session?